Well, trade deadline came and went, and today the New York Islanders did nothing. Big disappointment in a lot of ways. I know a lot of fans, some of them wanted to see a sell off, wanted to see this team deal some of their players with expiring contracts. I know other people wanted to see an addition. We're going to talk about it, break it all down, and kind of commiserate together as we head toward the last part of this season and the race for the playoffs. We've got all that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast special trade deadline edition.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to this special trade deadline day edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Gil Martin, so glad you could join us today and be part of the Locked On Islanders family as we talk a little bit about what did and did not happen over the last few days with the trade deadline. And look, this was a disappointing day. I know we've talked during the build-up to the trade deadline that the Islanders could go in a number of different directions. They could try to trade away maybe your Scott Mayfields, your Josh Baileys, your Semyon Varlamovs, and add some cap space and get ready to retool at the very least. And the other option, of course, was to add, whether it was to add a goal scorer or a puck-moving defenseman. But none of that happened today, all quiet on the trade front. And, yeah, that was a big disappointment. Now, look, the Islanders did make two moves during the trade deadline period, for whatever that's worth. You had the Bo Horvat deal, and Horvat has certainly done a good job since coming to the Islanders. And I don't think the Islanders would be where they are right now. In the 12 games, they're 6-3-3 in the 12 games since Horvat came out. He's got 5 goals, 8 points in those 12 games. And imagine if he was still playing with Matthew Barzal or, had Barzy still stayed healthy, or if Horvat had other high-quality line mates with him, he certainly would be probably even more productive statistically than he has been. But overall, I like the fact that they were able to sign Horvat to the extension. That made a big difference as far as the value of this trade is concerned. And Helen, yeah, I see what you're saying there. And I think the Horvat trade is good for this team as they try to make a run for the trade deadline. Now, down the road, the fact that they traded away yet another first-round pick, that eventually will come back to affect this team. And it's most likely going to be Lou Lamoriello's successor who has to deal with that. So we know more or less what we have in Bo Horvat. We've got a guy who's good on faceoffs. He can kill penalties. He can add things on the power play. He's on the top line, and he adds some leadership. I mean, here's a guy who was the captain of the Vancouver Canucks before he was traded. But the unknown right now, more or less, is the second deal that Lou Lamoriello made, and he made it a couple of days before the actual trade deadline, and that was Pierre Engvall. Now, we haven't seen Engvall yet. He is, as of right now, set to make his Islanders debut tomorrow, Saturday, 12:30 Eastern Time start at the UBS Arena. Big, big game against the Detroit Red Wings. Engvall didn't cost very much, which I think was, not a bad thing. I don't think they would overpay for a guy who most likely in the long run is either a second or third line kind of guy. I think he's ideally suited to the third line. But realistically, Engvall gives you size, he gives you speed, and we know the Islanders needed speed. There was no question about that, especially after they traded away Anthony Beauvillier, who is one of the few speedy players on this team. So I like the size. I like the speed. Lou Lamoriello, obviously familiar with Engvall. He drafted him when he was running the Toronto Maple Leafs. So as always, this happens. Lou always has his guys. So I think that Engvall will be helpful. Whether or not the Islanders sign him beyond the end of this year remains to be seen. But the two additions that the team made, I think, were at least very positive additions for the short term. Now, Helen, as far as when we go live, each show on this network on YouTube debuts at midnight, and Sunday night at midnight through Thursday night at midnight. But you can watch the shows on YouTube at any time. This is a special live event. DMC, I don't think he has Grabner speed, but he was considered the fastest skater among the Maple Leafs forwards. And I think that he will add some badly needed speed to the Islanders lineup. And that is something, again, Anthony Beauvillier, I liked him as a player. He came up clutch in the playoffs, both of the times that the team made that run to the conference final. But he was also one of the few players, especially among the forwards, that had the ability to really, create with speed. You had Barzal, you have Dobson on the blue line, and you used to have Beauvillier. I think Engvall will give them that dimension again. And add a little speed. Now, he's not a natural goal scorer. Do not expect him to get more than 15, maybe 20 goals tops if he's on the team for a full season. And even though he's big at 6'5", he is not known for his physicality. He doesn't have a lot of hits. That's not the way he plays the game. But he does do certain things very well, and they are things that the Islanders didn't have in abundance, and the biggest one of those is speed. The other thing I like about Engvall is his versatility. He can play left wing, right wing, or center, and the way the Islanders are sort of trying to deal with injuries, having that versatility definitely helps. He is supposed to be on a line with Anders Lee and Bo Horvat tomorrow. We'll see whether or not Lane Lambert sticks with that plan or decides to move him around. But look, if and when you get back J.G. Pajot, if and when you get back Matthew Barzal, Cal Clutterbuck, here's a guy who can play on any of your four lines, although I don't think he's really fourth line material because of his lack of physicality. But DMC, the wall is not his strength with regard to your comment there. So bottom line, though, he will add some dimensions and give this team a little push. So that's the two players that the Islanders did add at the trade deadline, but we are going to discuss what they didn't do because I think there were a few holes left unfilled, and a few moves that could have been made to boost this team that were not made. But first, we're going to talk about Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they are all covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, my personal favorite, the cookies and cream. And, these protein bars, they're not just tasty, but listen to these macros. They average only 130 calories per bar, just 4 grams of sugar, but they pack a whopping 17 grams of protein. You could still go to Built.com and order a box, have it delivered directly to your home. But now you can also go to Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a box in person if you want to feel that craving right away. So check out Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. You could thank me later. All right, guys. Let's talk about some of the things that the Islanders didn't do. And I think the most obvious one in what they didn't add has got to be a puck-moving defenseman. Islander fans and people who either comment or who get in touch with me on Twitter or email, making comments here on YouTube. A lot of people talk about how the Islanders struggle to get the puck out of their own zone and make transitions. And they've been struggling a lot this year in doing that. We really did need to add, if you're going to make that playoff push, and Lou Lamoriello seems to be doing that, you needed to add a puck-moving defenseman. I am still not sold on Sebastian Aho as an everyday NHL player. I think he's a great seventh defenseman. In the AHL, he's an all-star, but in his own zone, Aho just seems to struggle. He has trouble with turnovers, and teaming him with Noah Dobson, who also kind of struggles in his own end, really seems to be a bit of a problem as a defensive pairing. And as a result of having the two of them as a pair that Lane Lambert put together just recently, I've noticed Noah Dobson's ice time has gone down. Now, the Islanders aren't getting a lot of power plays, so that I think has something to do with it. But overall, I would have liked to have seen a puck-moving defenseman added to the mix if Lou was in addition mode. And if you look at some of the puck-moving defensemen that were out there, and a few of them were dealt. I mean, Carolina picked up Shane Gostisbehere. And again, we're not talking about a long-term solution here, but, you know, Gostisbehere went for a third-round pick in 2026. The Wild got John Klingberg for a fourth-round pick in 2025. Neither of these guys are you know, all-star defensemen. Neither of them are long-term solutions. But if you're going to make that run and say, you know, Lou Lamoriello is bringing in Bo Horvat, he's bringing in Pierre Engvall, that means to me he's going for it, at least, you know, for the most part. He's setting this up to try to make the playoffs. And to not add that defenseman, to me, is a problem. I think that either one of those guys would have been an upgrade over Aho or over even, you know, Parker Wotherspoon or Samuel Bolduc, both of whom I like and both of whom I think, you know, would be an upgrade over Aho on a day-to-day basis. But I was disappointed very much that Lou didn't add anybody on the blue line, mostly because this team's defense just isn't deep enough and isn't consistent enough this year. And, you know, you think about the playoffs. If the Islanders make the playoffs, you're going up either against Boston or Carolina, most likely, in the first round. Those are two teams that if your defense turns the puck over, you cough up the puck, it's going to be in the back of the net more often than not. And therefore, for the Islanders to be competitive in those series, they're going to need their defensemen to be smart with the puck and not turn the puck over, especially when they're in their own zone. And you've got to make good transitions from defense to offense. And then B, they're going to need Ilya Sorokin to stand on his head. And let's face it, if they keep the same six guys that they've got now in the lineup, he's going to have to bail them out. And that's really what tends to happen when the Islanders win games. Either the defense has a better game, or they, you know, you get a situation where either Sorokin or Varlamov, whoever happens to be in goal for that game, comes up big and bails the team out. I definitely want to see, since we did not, and yes, UFC Isles fan, yeah, Ilya Sorokin is indeed a brick wall. I want to see more of a different defensive pairing. You can't have Aho and Dobson as a unit. You don't have to keep Pelech and Pulock together necessarily, but Aho and Dobson, too similar in style, and also their weaknesses are too similar, and it just isn't a very effective pairing when you put it all together. So, look, that was a big disappointment. The other area that you might have thought the Islanders could have tried to add and supplement would have been another offensive player, another goal scorer. But let's face it, the ammunition wasn't there by the time trade deadline came and went. Timo Meier was already off the board. Most of the big names weren't there. And I mean, Besser, I think, was really the only guy among the better known forwards of Vancouver. There weren't too many other big name forwards out there to get, and it would have taken a creative deal because the Islanders don't have a number one pick this year after the Horvat trade. Because that trade is that first round pick is protected. If the Islanders falter, then you have a big problem. You can't trade the 2024 pick either. So there were no number one picks. You've already dealt your number one prospect in Aatu Räty. I can't see how the Islanders end up adding a big time scorer. Yeah, Max Domi DMC was still out there. He ended up going, but could the Islanders have matched that deal? Did they have, the right combination of picks or prospects to sort of, get that deal done? Yeah, I don't know if that would have happened. So that was the thing. Gail, as far as your question goes, yeah, I think the fact that a lot of the other GMs weren't impressed with our assets, tough to get a team to pick up Bailey. How do you, then, taking Bailey off your hands at this point with his cap hit really doesn't, that's asking for a benefit. So to get a player back on top of that, you have to give up even more. And I think that is part of the problem. John Smith, as far as, yeah, you could have made it conditional, the 2024 pick, and move it to 2025. But that gets complicated. And the problem with that, not that there aren't some teams that might go for it, but a lot of teams, wanted to pick in this year's draft, which is very deep, and may not be willing to wait until 2025 to get that pick back, especially if you're talking about a player who is known, like a Besser or a Domi, and B, if there's other teams out there who are willing to give you a pick this year or next year, that is probably going to be even better than what the Islanders have to offer. So that is kind of why this went the way it was, and I'm disappointed. I thought that the Islanders at least should have added a puck-moving defenseman, but they did not do that. Now, we are going to talk about the alternative, the fact that nobody was traded away. They didn't restock the prospect pool, didn't recoup some of the draft picks they added, and clear up some cap space. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for the quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. You can start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, guys. What didn't happen? The Islanders did not trade anybody away. Josh Bailey, still a New York Islander. I think that the solution to the Bailey situation will most likely be an offseason buyout. The Islanders do have the ability to buy out a player or two. And I think that realistically, Bailey is a big-time candidate to be bought out during the upcoming off season. Scott Mayfield was not traded away. He is on the last year of an expiring contract. I would not be surprised to see Lou Lamoriello extend Mayfield again if, and if is always a big if, he's willing to do it at a reasonable price. Now, Mayfield had a very team-friendly contract that is now ending, and hopefully he will again be available at a reasonable rate. He is now on the wrong side of 30, so the question of, how long you would want to sign him for, that remains to be seen. But the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to lose him for nothing. So that is sort of hanging there, and that is not necessarily a good situation. So you either hope that they would sign Mayfield for a reasonable rate, otherwise you lose him for nothing. But I was disappointed that Varley didn't go, Mayfield, none of these players were really, dealt away. And this team, look, we've traded away. Lou Lamoriello has dealt 4 consecutive first-round picks. And look, they're in. There's no doubt that Lou Lamoriello is saying, we're all in. He is trying to get this team to the playoffs this year. And his thinking, and I'm not saying it's the right thinking, but his thinking is, we're going to get into the playoffs. We have one of the best, if not the best, goalies in the league in Ilya Sorokin. We know how to play playoff-style hockey, or at least they did under Barry Trotz. And we're going to go out there and maybe catch lightning in a bottle the way they did the 2 years they made the conference final. I'm concerned about the fact that the prospect pool for this team is among the worst ranked in the National Hockey League right now. Before the Horvat trade, where you traded another first-round pick, you traded Ratu, they were ranked 27th by The Athletic out of the 32 NHL teams. But Ratu was the number 1 prospect. So now you got to figure they're 29th, 30th, something in that range. Anthony Rizzi, as far as, no, I didn't think Lou was really going to trade away players because Lou is going all in. That is Lou being Lou. And we saw him do that in New Jersey. We saw him do that in Toronto. And it worked in New Jersey. He won Stanley Cups. In Toronto, they were competitive. But then as soon as Lou leaves, as soon as the team gets a little older, the cupboard tends to be bare, and you need to make that rebuild. Now, Islander fans, don't lose all hope. I will say this. This coming summer, this off season, there is a good chance to try to trade away some players and recoup some draft picks. You're not going to do it now, but you certainly could do it before this draft. And, that opens up a little bit of an opportunity. It's disappointing, though, that no players were traded, no draft picks were accumulated, no prospects were accumulated. And look, this team is all in to try to squeak into the playoffs and try to do some damage. It will not be easy to do that. And, because you're either going to face Boston or Carolina in that first round. And then if you win that first round, you're going to play Tampa or Toronto or the Rangers or the Devils. That's odds on by far, depending on which division they end up being slotted into. That's who you're going to face. So it is not an easy playoff run, but I'll back it up and put it this way. In 2020, when the playoffs started and the Islanders just barely made the playoffs, nobody thought they were going anywhere either. And they went all the way to the conference finals. In 2021, the Islanders, again, one of the last few teams to make the playoffs, and they go on the long playoff run. So that's loose thinking. It is a definite concern, though, that the cupboard is bare as far as draft picks and the prospect pool isn't strong. Jazz, as for your question, why is this team suddenly playing like a Trotz team? Here's why. We're getting to the point in the regular season where this team is starting to prepare for the playoffs. They are trying to start to play more of a playoff style hockey. Under Barry Trotz, they did that all the time. They played tight checking, positionally sound defense, all the forwards back check, everybody gets back, everybody plays. That was their MO all year. Now, under Lane Lambert, okay, the defensemen are going to join the rush a little more often. The defensemen are going to pinch a little more often. We didn't, see that quite as much the last few games. I think they're starting to say, we're going to get ready to play more of a playoff style. We're going to start preparing. We're going to start trying to win games more 3-2, 2-1, 1-0, because that's the way this team ended up, is built. That's how they're built to win. They don't have the big guns necessary to go out there and win games 6-4 with regularity. It'll happen once in a while, but it's not going to happen with regularity. As far as Sorokin is concerned, I see UFC Isles fan and Jazz asking about Sorokin and Frank V. I don't know that he's necessarily going anywhere. And here's why I think they're going to re-sign Varlamov. First of all, Varlamov mentors Sorokin. They're friends. I think Varlamov sort of helped Sorokin adjust to life on Long Island and in North America, and that was a big plus. Second of all, I know that Varlamov wants to remain an Islander. He basically said that after his strong performance in his last start, and that Lou likes having two goalies he can count on. There are no goalies in the farm system right now who are NHL ready. They don't want to go with Corey Schneider. He's an AHL guy at this stage of his career, and it makes sense for him to mentor the younger guys. And, I just don't see right now any goalies in the system who are ready. So that's where we're at. I think they re-sign Varley. I think they try to re-sign Mayfield as well, and they buy out Bailey. Those are three things that I'm saying are very likely to happen during the course of this offseason. Any other questions before we wrap this up? And I want to thank everybody for coming by here. And we will post this on YouTube, so it'll be available there. And hopefully this team finishes strong. Look, the next few games for this Islanders team are vital, because if you look at the next 4 games, they are all against the teams that are battling for those wild card spots. Detroit, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Washington. 3 of the 4 games are at home. Pittsburgh, the only road game, but that's who you're facing. And hopefully they can get something together, and let's get at least 6 out of the possible 8 points. UFC Isles fan, I think Maggio is promising. I think he has potential, but I think he's still at least a year or 2 away from being NHL ready. He's in juniors right now. He's probably going to need a season in Bridgeport before you bring him up to the island. And, you know, maybe in 2025, 2026, he's ready to go. But that doesn't mean I don't think that he can do something. Yeah, his OHL stats are insane, and that's a good thing. But there's a big difference between getting things done against 17, 18, 19-year-olds and doing it against 25-year-old experienced players who are among the best in the world. So I like Maggio, but he's not going to help this year and probably not going to help next year. But at least he gives Islander fans something to look forward to. That's going to do it for this special post-deadline. Oh, I see we have one more question here from Bob. Who here wants a GM not named Lamoriello next year? You know, I think a lot of people who listen to and watch this podcast would count themselves among those type of people. Anyway, thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today and having our live broadcast here as we wrap up what the Islanders did and didn't do at the trade deadline. We will be back with our regular schedule. So Sunday night / Monday morning at midnight, we will have our regular show. We'll have our key takeaways, our unsung hero of the game, and our go to the game from Saturday afternoon's game. And I'll be live tweeting tomorrow, of course. So follow me at Ice Wars NYR VSNYI, and I'll give you some instant insight and analysis. And always great to talk Isles hockey with everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great weekend, everyone. And of course, let's go Islanders.